Hello and welcome back. This is Religious Studies 361 Ethics, and this is the second part of our discussion about the Justwar tradition. In the first part, we covered the draft. And today, we are going to talk about the Justwar doctrine properly, conscientious objection, and the principle of double effect. Now, when there is talk about going to war, as so often happens in this country, you may think that the decision to go to war may be just a matter of a personal decision, like, oh yeah, I think we should teach that guy a lesson, or, I think we should go. But based on what? Well, there is an ethical guideline to judge you on whether a particular war is just or unjust, and that is the content of the Justwar doctrine that we're going to be studying today here. The Justwar doctrine gives you a number of conditions that have to be met so that the war may be considered morally justified. The roots of the Justwar doctrine are pre-Christian. They're pre-Christian. They go back to ancient Judaism and to the Roman world. We find some writings in Cicero, for example, that concern this matter as to when it's morally appropriate to wage a war. However, in the Christian tradition, the doctrine has developed over the past really almost 2,000 years, and with the different thinkers, new ideas, new developments have been included in the doctrine. So it's like a snowball effect, kind of. It wasn't a doctrine which was created by one author and that's it. No, it's been thought about by many different authors in the Western Christian tradition over almost 2 millennia. The first of those authors, in a sense, the father of the Justwar doctrine in the Christian tradition, would be St. Augustine. St. Augustine. We're talking about the 4th century of the Christian era, okay, the 300s. St. Augustine. The Justwar tradition establishes 2 sets of conditions that have to be met so that a war can be considered just or justified. The first set of conditions is known as ad bellum in Latin, okay, ad bellum conditions. Ad bellum conditions. Bellum, what does bellum mean, Chris? You heard the expression before? You heard the expression antebellum? Antebellum? Antebellum literature? You heard that expression before? Sounds kind of vaguely familiar? Antebellum literature? Well, bellum means war in Latin. That's where you get the word bellicose. To be a bellicose person. A bellicose person is a very warring person, a person who's always creating trouble or fighting for something. Antebellum literature is an expression used in American literature to refer to the literature from before the Civil War, from before 1860. Antebellum literature. In this case, ad bellum means the conditions that have to be met so that going to war, so the decision to go to war is morally justified. What are those conditions? Number one is, they're just common sense conditions, okay? Number one is you have to have a just cause. A just cause. What is a just cause? Well, that can be defined. That has been defined and redefined over time, okay? A just cause today is considered self-defense or the defense of an innocent third party that's being attacked, unjustly attacked. But in the past, maybe an offense to your king was enough of a just cause to go to war against another country. Okay. So the meaning of these conditions has been redefined over time. You need to have also legitimate authority. Not anyone is legitimized to launch a war. Therefore, terrorist groups, private armies are unethical, are immoral on this count. What is a legitimate authority? Well, again, that have changed over time. In the past, it was the king only. Now we would say it's a democratically elected authority or an international body like the UN. You need to have a extenuated. You have to have tried to avoid war at all costs. You have to have used all diplomatic means to the extreme before going to war. So war must be your last resort. You must have tried to avoid war by all means before you go to war. You make a decision to go to war. You need to have the right intention. The right intention. So you may have a just cause, a legitimate authority, and you may have tried diplomatic means to avoid the war. But if your intention is to teach a lesson to the world to show that you are the strongest, blah, 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 it's not going to work. It's going to render your war immoral. You have to have a realistic chance of winning the war. So El Salvador may have a legitimate authority, a just cause, and may have exhausted all diplomatic means concerning some issue with the U.S. But if El Salvador declares war on the U.S., what's going to happen is the country is going to be wiped off the face of the earth because it's a little tiny country versus a giant. And therefore, it would be a suicidal war. And a suicidal war is not morally justified. If you don't have a realistic chance of winning, you don't want to commit suicide. Okay? So these are the four main conditions that have to be met. All of them need to be met so that the decision to go to war can be considered morally justified. Now, we have another set of conditions, which are the in bello conditions. In bello are those conditions that have to be met so that the way in which the war is being waged is morally justified. So there's two things, okay? The decision to go to war, but then how you wage your war is also open to moral scrutiny. And these are two conditions only: proportionality and discrimination. Some theorists use the surgery analogy in here. So it's like when you need to operate on someone, you want to cause as little damage as possible, only what's strictly necessary to bring health to the body. Now, what does health translate as in this particular context? Well, the goal of war must always be the restoration of peace and justice. So you need to cause as little damage as necessary to bring peace and justice back. Not more than necessary. You don't want to carpet bomb a town, kill unnecessary numbers of people, or destroy unnecessary places, or And discrimination. You're only morally justified in attacking those military or civilian personnel that pose an actual danger to you. They're combatants. You're not justified in harming innocent, non-combatant civilians. So, proportionality and discrimination. Now, in connection with these two conditions, we have what is called the principle of double effect. Principle of double effect, which you could call even side effect, but it's technically called the principle of double effect. And what the principle of double effect states that as long as you do your best to avoid harming civilians, harming innocent personnel.